Hey, welcome back to school, everybody. We just wanted to take the opportunity to touch base with you first and foremost in the morning and provide a bit of an assembly. I know a little bit of a repeat, and it doesn't feel like too long ago that we were sat here in September in the sports hall, socially distanced, and I was giving a similar presentation. But I think we didn't expect a second lockdown and to not see you since we broke up for Christmas. So it's really important. We wanted to touch base with you first thing in the morning and just go over some of those basic expectations about school behaviour in general, but also obviously COVID and the current circumstance both in school and outside of school to make sure that we're doing everything that we should be doing.
Good morning, Year 11, and welcome back to school. To start my assembly off, I'm going to share a little story with you about this gentleman, Nicholas Stephen Alcemade. Winter of 1944, obviously during the Second World War, while Nicholas was on a bombing run over Germany. He was a tail gunner in a Lancaster bomber, which is the photograph there of this particular plane. He found himself in quite a tight spot when his plane was hit by enemy gunfire and quickly filled with smoke and flames. Now, tail gunners on these Lancaster bombers couldn't wear parachutes because the space that they were in where they were sat within the turret was far too small to have a parachute on their back. And so by the time Nicholas managed to haul himself out of his turret and reach for his parachute, he could see that it was completely on fire and he just couldn't use it. So he had two choices. He could either stay in the plane and burn to death and be in the plane crash, or the second choice was to jump out of the plane without a parachute. So he decided to leap from the plane rather than perish horribly in the flames. He hauled open the hatch and tumbled out into the night. Now he was 3 miles above the ground and was falling at about 120 miles per hour. When Alcemade, or Nicholas, was asked about this years later, he said, "It felt very quiet. The only sound was the drumming of the aircraft engines in the distance, and I felt no sensation of falling at all. I felt suspended in space." And rather to his surprise, he found himself to be strangely composed and at peace. Now, the experience for Nicholas was so surreal and dreamy that he was never really certain afterwards whether he lost consciousness or not. But he was certainly jerked back to reality when he crashed through branches of the lofty pine trees that you can see there and landed with a resounding thud in a snowbank, sitting up. And he'd somehow lost both his boots in the fall, had a sore knee and some minor cuts and bruises, but otherwise than that, he was quite unharmed. So, after he landed in the big snow mound in Germany from his plane, and basically mainly unharmed apart from quite a bad knee injury, he was captured by German soldiers and spent the remaining time of Second World War in a prisoner of war camp in Germany. Then at the end of the Second World War, he returned home to Loughborough, which is in the Leicestershire in the England Midlands. And from there, he got a job at a chemical chemical plant. And as you can see, there's a photograph of it there on the screen. Then while he was working at this chemical plant with chlorine gas, and I'm sure as you know, chlorine is quite a harmful chemical, his gas mask came loose and he was instantly exposed to the dangerously high levels of the chemical. He lay unconscious for 15 minutes in the factory until his co-workers dragged him to safety. Miraculously, he survived that. Then he returned back to work to the factory. Then sometime after that, he was adjusting some pipe when it broke and it sprayed him from head to foot with sulfuric acid. And he suffered extensive burns from that incident, but thankfully he survived. Then when he returned back to work for a third time to the factory, a 9-foot long metal pole fell on him from a height and very nearly killed him. But once again, he recovered. And he decided that this time, however, that he was not going to tempt fate any longer and left the factory. He took a safer job as a furniture salesman and lived out the rest of his life without incident. He died peacefully in bed, aged 65, in 1987. Now you're probably wondering, why is Mrs. Rigby sharing this story with us of a World War II aircraft bomber? What has it got to do with year 11 or any pupil in school now? Well, first of all, it's an incredible story, and it is true. I advise you to Google this gentleman. And why do I tell you? Well, it's to share an example of how resilient and strong humans can be. Nicholas should have died 4 times, but he didn't. He died peacefully. He recovered. When some adversity happened, when something awful happened to him, he recovered from it, he got on with it, and he managed to live actually a fulfilled and happy life. He got on with it, and he carried through. Like Nicholas, we are actually coming out of a challenge. We are coming through a challenge, and from this challenge, we've got 2 choices. The first choice is that we can look back at what's happened to us over lockdown and over COVID, and we can moan about it, and we can blame others, and we can talk about how bad it's been. Or our second choice is that we can look forward. We can thank God, first of all, that we are still here. We can celebrate the fact that we still have our friends and possibly members of our families, and that we still have school and access to an education, and that you have a future, and that you have a future full of opportunities. And I'd like to advise you now that you take the second choice, choice number 2. That's the right things to do. The right thing to do, the sensible thing to do, and do you know what? It's the only thing to do, to look forward and to celebrate that we have future opportunities. And so that second of the 2 choices of looking forward, thanking God and celebrating things that we have is the sensible choice. It is the right choice, and it is the choice that you need to make. In fact, it's the only thing to do, looking forward. So at this time, let's just revisit our mission statement, learning together as a community in Christ. I shared this with you and explained this to you at the start of the school year in our assembly in the sports hall in September. And I want to remind you again of it and what its relevance is to you. Learning together is a really important part of our mission and what we are about here at St John Fisher. So upon your return to school now, in your choice of looking forward, we are going to continue to learn and pick up from what you have been doing on your remote education, but we're going to do it together. We're going to support one another and make sure that we respect and work with one another. And as a community, we're going to make sure that it is safe and that you are listening to the safety instructions that you're going to receive from Mr. Moore in a couple of moments. You have been brilliant during lockdown. You have worked really, really hard. And I know that some of you have struggled with it. Some of you have struggled managing the amount of work or completing your work. Some of you have mentally struggled because you've not been able to see your friends and have probably been feeling quite isolated. And that's okay. We can help you with that. But most of us, and for most of us, we've been okay. We have survived. Please don't ask me about the media and what they're saying in there about this nonsense of this lost generation and this COVID generation that they're going to be behind and there's no future for them. Folks, that's absolute nonsense. Like I've just said before, you've worked hard in lockdown and your future is well ahead of you. It's not written for you yet. Your future is what you make it, and you're going to make it absolutely brilliant, and we're going to help you do that. So let's look forward, let's be positive, and let's be brilliant together. Year 10. So in being brilliant together and making sure that we remain positive, there are just a few things that I need to share with you so that you're aware of what the expectations are for your year group. Well, first of all, you probably heard in the media that there are no GCSE examinations this summer. There will be centre assessed grades. That means as a school, as an examination centre, we are going to decide what your grades are. And I tell you that because, of course, all of you are studying for your GCSE English Literature this year. And at this moment, when I'm speaking to you, you are still going to receive a grade for that GCSE this summer. So your English staff are going to be doing examined assessments with you and making sure that they can collect as enough evidence as possible to give you the best grade they can in the summer for that GCSE. Most importantly, you need to attend school every day, all day and on time. You need to be here because the work that you are doing in your lessons is going to contribute, of course, to the GCSEs that you're going to do in Year 11. You need to work with your teachers. If you've missed parts of the curriculum, your teachers have planned their learning sequences to account for this. You need to catch up, so make sure you work with your staff and listen to the instructions. You need to complete all the work that your teachers set you in class. Don't be mithered about talking to your friends about whatever. Get on with the work that has been set. And any work that your teachers set for you that wants to be completed at home, make sure you finish that off too, to the best of your ability. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the GCSEs next year in the summer of 2022, whether they will be centre assessed grades or whether they'll be sat examinations in the sports hall like in previous years. So that's why it's really important, Year 10, that all the work that you do now for the remainder of Year 10 and in Year 11 is completed to the best of your ability and that you put your best efforts into it, because that is obviously all the evidence that we will supply to the exam boards if they ask for it. And lastly, engage in your learning and engage in school life. I'm going to pass you over to Mr. Moore now. He's going to explain about the safety operations in school.
I hopefully won't take as long as I did in September. We'll box things off in 5 or 10 minutes. There are some things that have changed significantly, and there are some things that haven't. But again, like I said previously, it's important that we all have a refresher, staff and students, about certain structures and systems and processes in school that allow us to keep everybody as safe as possible. While obviously you haven't been in school since prior to Christmas, we've been liaising and working really closely with the Wigan Council. We've been working closely with the Department for Education and the government in terms of the guidance that's released when you're allowed to come back to school, what it looks like in school and what we need to put in place to keep you safe and everybody else safe. A lot of work has been going on behind the scenes to make sure that our site and our staff know what they're doing and that we can bring you back in as safe an environment as possible. I'm just going to take the opportunity to remind you of some of the basic hygiene, cleanliness rules and routines that we've got running at school. Again, in all of the guidance, it says that if we can get the basics right in this regard, all of the reports, all of the publications that come out to do with the transmission of COVID, the number one thing that is reported every single time is if you can get the hygiene and cleanliness correct, you reduce significantly the chance of COVID transmission in your school. So it's a really, really fundamental thing for us to mention and discuss briefly again. Hasn't changed significantly in that regard. We've still got our hand sanitizers outside every classroom and dotted around the school site at regular points. We expect you to sanitize your hands regularly with the gel. We expect you to do it as you enter the classroom. We expect you to do it as you exit the classroom. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. It's really important that when you wash your hands, if it's a toilet break or a break or lunchtime, that when you go to wash your hands properly, use appropriate soap. And if you are feeling a bit sniffly one day, you've got a cold, you're not feeling too well, or hay fever starting to come round, which happens to some people this time of year, you need to have a clean tissue on you. You need to follow the NHS advice of the catch it, bin it, kill it. You need to make sure that your hygiene routines are really strong. That goes in the bin. If you haven't got a tissue on you, which hopefully you should have, then you need to use the crux of your elbow to make sure that you catch as many of the particles that come out of your mouth as possible, and make sure that you then go and wash your hands as you should do. The hygiene and expectations in that regard, as a really quick reminder about your equipment again. We aren't a school at the moment that is handing out equipment and sharing equipment in the way that we would outside of COVID times. Obviously, because of how that can increase transmission. So it's more important than ever that you have pens and pencils and any equipment that you need for school. And I go back to the original point that I mentioned in September, that isn't having one biro in your top blazer pocket, and if it breaks, miss, I need to ask for a pen. That's making sure that you have 4 or 5 pens, biros, you have the relevant equipment that you need for school that day. Outside of even the COVID transmission, it shouldn't be that we're spending 5 or 10 minutes at the start of a really important lesson to hand out equipment to make sure everybody's equipped appropriately for learning. It should be an absolute basic expectation that you arrive at the lesson with the appropriate equipment and we can hit the ground running straight away in terms of moving on with the teaching and learning that needs to take place. On social distancing hasn't changed. There's been lots of conversations about when can that reduce or when can we minimize the distance that we need to have between each other, but through this whole process since you returned to us in September, the social distancing guidance hasn't changed. Quite clearly explains that there doesn't need to be any physical contact between each other. I know sometimes it is great to see your friends again. Some of you will have felt quite isolated for significant periods of this lockdown. It's not a very nice feeling. I understand all of those issues, but our main priority is to get you back into school safely, and to do that we need to minimize physical contact. And obviously we know that in some of our corridors, which is why we've put a one-way system in place, that there isn't always the opportunity to socially distance appropriately. But we've also got all of the guidance of publications that say when you're moving down a corridor and you're walking past somebody, the risk of transmission is absolutely minimal. At the same time, when there is an opportunity and there is space to socially distance properly, we should do it. And that is just good practice at the moment. Been doing this since you came back in September, that we put a one-way system in place around the school site to be able to move safely around the school site, and that is still in place now. At the moment as we speak, as you return, all of the paint that's on the floor, all of the badges, all of the stickers that help guide you around that one-way system will have been refreshed, and the school will be a very straightforward thing to follow in terms of that process. But I'm just going to put a map up really quickly again, just to re-highlight the key areas to you. Areas to touch on really quickly, just for a few people, probably 1 or 2 people who are a little bit confused by it. So the entrance, when we're looking at that O'Brien block, which is science and music and drama, the entrance to the O'Brien block is right round almost to the Baytree Road side of the school, and then the entrance is at that point. You do not enter via the arrow that's got the red exit at the moment that goes in via the exams office and has room 13, the PE classroom there. That is exit only, so you need to make sure you walk round, and yes, sometimes you have to go up some steps and you need to follow a one-way system round, but that's just part and parcel with a one-way system. It's more important that we follow the one-way system, and if you're an extra 30 seconds, 1 minute getting to your lesson, the teachers will be absolutely fine coping with that, knowing that you followed that system properly. A couple of other areas really quickly to touch upon is you could see the yellow arrow that leads up from the sports hall and the female changing area. The staircase that takes us up onto the top yard outside, that is up only. So people should only be going up those stairs onto the top yard. Nobody should be going down. The entrance into block CDE, you can see the one green arrow. There is one main entrance into the CDE block, and from that main middle entrance off the top yard, you then either go up the stairs and left to the library or languages, up the stairs and right to maths, down the stairs and left to English, or down right to history and humanities. And if you have art or Mr. Stuxbury or languages down in that bottom block area, you stay on the downstairs floor and you walk through English and walk straight through the other side. You should not be entering through one of the external exits. You come in through the same entrance as everybody else and walk through English and then through into the block that lies further down from that. Arrangements have stayed exactly as they were, so my next two slides will just be a really straightforward re-highlight, but they are exactly as they were when you broke up on the 16th of December before Christmas. Straightforward visual reminder for this is the map that's in front of you at the moment. So you can see at the bottom the year 11s have the mugger to use, year 10s have the bottom playground area, year 7s have the top playground, year 8s have the first netball basketball area in front of the sports hall, and then they also have in front of art down at the bottom. And then the year 9 have the much bigger area down the side of the sports hall and a little bit of that space that's in front of science as well. The entry and exits for the new canteen and the old canteen stay exactly as they were before you broke up. So just check along for your respective year group here, depending on who's looking at this assembly. But you can see that again, the year 7s and 9s go for an early break and an early lunch. And the year 8s, 10s and 11s go at the normal times. Year 8s will go to the gym doors and will queue at 1:25. And as soon as we've moved the year 10s through the canteen appropriately, we'll then obviously get the year 8s in for their lunch as quick as possible. Changes to the way that you arrive and leave school. So I'll just re-highlight that really quickly to you. The entrance to school is via the main entrance on Bay Tree Road, the same area where the bus stop and people are dropped by the bus. Okay, so everybody should enter school through the main entrance on Bay Tree Road, and obviously the gates there get locked at 8:40 a.m. and anybody who misses that is late. So you need to make sure that you are at that entrance before 8:40 a.m., ideally around 8:30 a.m. or just after. So that's the main entrance into school. At the end of the school day, we'll do what we were doing before Christmas, where we open 3 exits at 3 p.m. So the main entrance will become an exit as it has done always. We will also open the exit down at Sacred Heart at the back of school, and we will also open the exit down at the Science O'Brien block so that people who've had science can exit through those doors as well. Sport is a big one. Obviously the weather has improved a little bit. Now it may not stay that way perfectly, but we are coming round to March, we are coming round to spring, so we hope that there's some lighter nights and lighter mornings and that the weather improves a little bit. There is an inevitable increased risk of transmission on the school bus because you're outside of your year group bubbles and you're unable to socially distance. So there are a number of things that you need to take into account and think about that could help with that. Is, do you live within the vicinity where it is a walkable distance to school? And with the weather improving and it not being dark at the end of school, is there an opportunity for you to meet up with friends and walk safely to school? Again, outside in the fresh air, a much reduced chance of COVID transmission. Back of the school site where you can cycle to school and you can lock your bike up appropriately. Again, exactly the same approach that you reduce the transmission risk significantly. But of course, you need to make sure that if you are choosing to cycle to school, that you cycle carefully and safely, and make sure that if you are cycling on the roads, that you do everything you should do to make sure you're safe, including wearing a helmet. Working hours may have adapted or changed just slightly, and while I know it can be busy at the front of school at peak times, again, if there's an option for parents to drop you at school or collect you at the end of the day and maybe even park a little bit further down the road so that your parents don't feel as though they're trying to squash in across the buses. But if there was an option for parents to drop you and collect you, that again is a safer option. School bus services, and there are plenty of you who will have to use the school buses. It's really important, a couple of key things. First and foremost, before I touch on the face masks, that your behaviour and the way that you conduct yourself on those school buses is absolutely impeccable. I take personal pride with that because I work with the companies who run those bus services, and unfortunately sometimes have to take calls about our students not quite meeting the expectations that we have of you. So you need to make sure that if you're using our school bus services, your behaviour and the way you conduct yourself is absolutely spot on. Secondly, with the changes that I'm going to discuss in a moment around face masks, I do know that while a lot of people put their face masks on when they were on the bus, as soon as it drove off and went round the corner, a number of you took those face masks off. And I know that because the bus drivers were reporting that to me on a near daily basis. You now need to make sure that with the changes that have taken place to bring you back in safely, if you use our school bus, then you make sure that you wear your face mask, and that is a non-negotiable. Okay, if you are using the school bus service, you wear your face mask, and your face mask stays on the entire journey that you have to be able to get to school or get home. Face masks has changed slightly, so I'm going to touch base on that now because this is probably the biggest change out of anything that I'll talk to you about this morning. In this area, there has been a significant change around the use of face masks. Obviously, that's something that we're all very accustomed to now. We're used to wearing face masks, either if we're out and about or going into supermarkets or shops when they open back up again. But the rules have changed around how face masks are used in our school or in schools across the UK. The government and the DfE and Wigan Local Council have made some significant changes here. Whereas previously it was decided that face masks should not be used in the classroom whatsoever. It wasn't conducive to teaching and learning and communication between the teacher and the students. With the climate the way it is currently and cases still reducing significantly, it has been decided, it is now strongly recommended that you wear your face mask when you are in the classroom. I say that again, it's strongly recommended. And the reason that it's strongly recommended is that in the classroom you are unable to socially distance from other people within your year group. And that's really important because what it says is the risk of transmission is greatly reduced if you can socially distance. If you are unable to socially distance, which you are unable to in the classroom, then wearing your face mask will add further safety and further protection and reduce the risk of transmission between you, your friends who you sit next to, and obviously then, therefore, the families that they go home to at night and people who they see and love. Okay. Along with that, it also increases the safety measures that are in place in general within that classroom for our staff who come in and want to teach you and want to make progress. So really, really key point there that face masks are now strongly recommended in the classroom. You do now not need to wear your face mask if you are outside. So at break and lunchtime, if you are out on the yards in your designated zones or you're out down playing football down on the mugger or something like that, you don't now have to wear your face mask at any point when you are outside. But I'll say again, we do not need to, we should not have to and will not want to be reminding you that as soon as you step foot inside one of our entrances into any of the buildings in St John Fisher, your face mask goes on 4 or 5 yards before you even get to that door. It isn't a case of entering that door, walking through, and then the face mask goes on gradually over the next 15-20 yards. Your face mask goes on prior to getting to that door and before you enter into one of our buildings. And obviously there's absolutely no change that when you are moving around internally within our school site, within those buildings, that you should have your face mask on at all times. Actual face masks haven't changed in any way, shape or form though, in the same basic expectation. So you either have an appropriate cotton face mask that gets washed like the gentleman on the left, or you have a disposable one like the lady on the right. The important thing here is that we are not at a point now where we want to be lending out face masks to you. You should be coming to school as an absolute priority that you take on board that responsibility of keeping you, your friends, their families and your families safe, as well as our staff who are in school. So we shouldn't be having people come to school saying, oh, I've forgotten it, or I didn't realise it was that important. You know how important it is now, and all of the studies and all of the information is there to back up how important it is. So you need to make sure that you have an appropriate face mask, and you need to make sure that you have a spare face mask, because inevitably there will be, if you have one of the disposable ones, there may be an occasion where one of the hoops or loops that runs around the back of the ear snaps. You need to make sure you have a face mask and a spare, and that way we will never have an issue where you are having to borrow a face mask or you are walking around our school site without one on, which shouldn't happen. What I want to do is just touch base about the expectations and the behaviour. You know at St John Fisher that me, SLT, all of our staff have extremely high expectations for you and your behaviour, and we do that because we absolutely want the best for you, and having those high expectations allows us to come into school, to enjoy being in school, for everybody to be safe, and for teaching and learning and progress to take place that allows you hopefully to go on to whatever you'd like to do in the future and enjoy your time while you're with us at St John Fisher. So I'm just going to re-highlight a couple of those expectations and behaviours that are non-negotiables at our school. Quite simply, we have a really strong system in place where we offer lots of rewards. We want to say well done for everything that you do on the whole that is fantastic at our school. But we have high expectations from when you walk in. That's, well, more importantly than that, when you put your uniform on, you represent our school. So your behaviour walking to school, from school, your behaviour on the school buses also reflects on our school, and therefore we expect it to be fantastic. But when you walk through our school gates, you know that we have extremely high expectations of your behaviour. We will acknowledge everything that you do that is good and is brilliant, but we will also make sure that we hold you to account if things aren't good enough, because that is what we need to do to make sure that our school is the type of place that you want to come to enjoy your education. About this, re-highlighting the fact that we have an absolute zero tolerance approach to bullying at our school. I think we feel really passionately about this, along with a lot of students who I've spoken to. And one thing that I feel very confidently about is that our students don't believe that bullying is right, and they don't like it. So if they see something that is going on that they know is not right, and they know may fall under this bracket, that you go and tell someone, it doesn't matter who, but you go and tell somebody what is going on, because you get that gut feeling that what is going on isn't right. So you make sure that you stick with that we have that zero tolerance, and that we make sure that we continue the really positive atmosphere that we have in our school. Basic expectations is about respecting our school site and making sure that you don't drop any litter. Again, there's no excuses for this. We have bins that are within 20 yards really of anywhere that you could be stood on our school site. So quite simply, you need to go and you need to put your litter in the bin and make sure that you keep our school site a pleasant place for all of us to work at. When I spoke to you in September, and as it will be next September and the September after that and the September after that, your punctuality and making sure that you're at school on time each day is absolutely fundamental. It's a life skill. It's something that we're establishing now that will set you up for positive attitudes to your further education, to whatever career you choose to go on and do. It's really important that you can manage time, that you can set an alarm, get yourself out of bed and get yourself into school on time each and every day. It's a really, really important thing to be able to do. Attendance probably as important as it's ever been. I have absolutely no worries whatsoever. A lot of the reports in the media around catch up and concerns around this. And of course your teachers have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of work to do to be where you need to be. But if you are in school every single day and your attendance is absolutely spot on, then I have no concerns whatsoever that your teachers, who are absolutely brilliant, will get you to where you need to be from an academic perspective. There's a big if though. That's if you're in school every day. If there are significant periods of mis-schooling, that becomes an additional challenge. So it's really important that you attend each and every day. The government Government and the Wigan Local Authority have now told us that we need to start monitoring attendance and issuing our normal processes and systems that we would do if a student wasn't attending school or fell way under the percentage that we would expect of them. So again, these posters that are in your form rooms, have a quick glance at them, have a look at your own attendance, speak to your form tutor about it, because we will be starting to monitor this now much more closely as school reopens. You will have seen it previously. Again, I've no issues showing it again and again and again. I am a real believer of the fact that your attitude and your approach to life and your approach to school will determine your altitude, and by that I mean how you conduct yourself and how you portray yourself, and the way you are as a person will determine how far you go in life, be it relationships, or be it work or career and earnings and things like that, qualifications. The way that you approach everything will lead it, along that journey. You will get to where you want to go to if the basics are in place. People have felt very strange. People have felt like they're probably on a little bit of a roller coaster ride since Christmas. Another 2.5 months of being locked down and not able to see friends and family, and not able to go and do the things that you would normally do to relieve any stress and socialise. So it's absolutely normal, as it will be for your staff who are in school today, that there have been elements where they've felt certain anxiety, they've felt certain stresses, they may have felt some panics. It's really important that you don't feel like you're alone with that. We have some amazing pastoral staff in school, starting with your form tutor, but going through to your head of year and pastoral coordinator. We have some amazing staff in school who will go out of their way to do anything they can to support you, but you need to communicate that with us. And remember, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in saying that your mental health has not been in a great place. I think we can all admit to that a little bit. So if you do feel like you need any sort of support with that, please just go and talk with the right people and we'll make sure it happens. And I'm aware that I've touched on a lot of things again this morning that I did back in September when we brought you in the sports hall that morning. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for listening and taking all of this information on board and making sure that we have a brilliant start back to school and get things back to as they should be.